part 3. So we looked at our Bahmanian piece from Mali, and then we're going to move into Ghana, Africa. And this piece is a little bit under fertility and rituals. We're going to go into another section in a moment, but this piece was given to women who are having difficulty conceiving again, and it's to ensure the health and beauty of the baby. So what was important in that culture, again, this talks about that canon of beauty. It's on that same page. 6.10 is on page 149, talks about what's important to the culture. So a high forehead would be important. Tall forehead here, small mouth, you can't even really see a mouth, long neck perhaps, and maybe eyebrows would be something that's important. So you have this simplistic piece, and it's very cleanly polished and so on. It's a carved wood piece again, but this was to be carried around by the mother and then perhaps given to the baby afterward as a toy if the baby successfully came out beautifully. So, it's a funny thing. I was just listening to radio about a African ritual. And, when you focus your attention on something and you think about a lot of these art objects that we found in a variety of cultures, but the idea is that you're taking all your energy and your focus and your hope and you're focused on this idol or this doll or this figure, and you're wishing good, you're sending good feelings. It's prayer, but it's a different form of prayer, if that makes sense. So it's a different kind of way of thinking about things. We're way before the Christian era. This is a 20th century piece, but the belief system was developed way before and south of any connection to Christianity. And now we have the primordial and human couple. So this is our subheading. It starts on 149, so it's kind of hard. Some of her headings like this, they wrap around the other page, but make sure you're talking about the correct example. I don't have any big writing homework for this particular chapter. You're doing a critique on the Mutu collages, but you do want to kind of be observant of that because there are times you'll write about the wrong thing, and I mentioned that earlier. Okay, so Adam and Eve is our primordial couple for the Western world, for the Christian, Muslim, and Jewish communities. This is still Adam and Eve from the Old Testament. All three of those religions use some of the Old Testament references. So they're the mother and father of humankind, and many of the depictions were rooted in creation myths that existed before Christianity, but we don't know that much about it because it wasn't written down. So this particular scene, we're thinking God is saying to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and conquer it. Unfortunately, I think we've taken that phrase a little too seriously if you think about our global warming situation. But this is later in Genesis, the fall is described, and then they're exiled from the Garden of Eden. But we think about these two as the important primordial couple, and you want to think about the harmony of the union of this first male and female and how important they are, okay? So we have Adam's pain and their shame and agony of being kicked out of the Garden of Eden. So if we compare these two, we look at the Dogon culture, primordial couple in Mali, Africa, much more sexualized. Again, there's nudity here, but the way that the Christians associate the nudity is with shame. It wasn't shameful in the garden, and then once they're out in the world, quote unquote, then it is shameful. Not so with African culture. And he's showing his union or connection with this primordial couple. You're seeing his union by his arm wrapped around her and touching her breast, and then also touching himself. So that's the connection to their fertility and their union and having children. She's got a baby on her back, which you can't see in this image, and he's got some hunting implements on his back. So this is our primordial couple, and this is what in any culture, you aspire to this primordial couple, if that makes sense. In this, we see that these are equally exalted, the sense of importance for both figures, and you'll find that on and off with different cultures. That hierarchical scale, if the male and female are equally sized, then you know they're of equal importance. That's conveying that information. Fertility. So also the jewelry is symbolizing their sexual power, and we're thinking about harmony and order in the culture. So that is why we're both in this sort of same pose, if you will, on a bench together. Okay, so human couples. We get into the depiction of human couples in art historical context. This is called the wedding portrait, or Giovanni Arnolfini and his bride. It's a double portrait and has a ton of symbolism. Now, there are recent debates about whether or not this is actually a wedding portrait, hopefully, with a hopeful pregnancy to come. She's not actually pregnant depicted here, but that's her holding her skirt up to look pregnant and hoping for fertility. It's also possible that this portrait was of his first wife who died as a memento mori. We don't know for sure. So they're shown in the bedroom rather than church, but if you look, I know it's hard to see here, but if you look in the book, you can see it a little bit better. Online, perhaps you can get a better image, but there's a church steeple out there. I feel like it just doesn't really hardly show, but we're looking at the church. This is a holy union. It's not, because it's taking place outside of the church doesn't mean it's without God. It's just that their focus is on having children. So she's hoping to be pregnant as soon as possible. So his hand is raised in a gesture of blessing. Their shoes are off. You can clearly see the shoes off to the side, and they're touching the floor with bare feet. Well, socks, but same thing. They're touching the floor because it's holy ground. So usually, in many types of religious areas, Buddhist, Hindu, for instance, you take your shoes off. Muslim, I believe, too, to go in and pray. You don't bring the dirt from the outside world into the holy place. So anyway, the shoes are off. The little dog is a sign of fidelity. Dogs are signs of fidelity in imagery that we're thinking of. A single candle is the presence of God. And there's many more other things in here. The oranges are eternal life. Okay, so there's a ton of stuff here listed. Right, representing conquest of death. I just said it a little bit differently. But that's all there. You can look back onto your regular PowerPoint and observe that a little more clearly. Okay, so these are two wedding portraits, radically different. This is Western Europe in the Renaissance, and we have a lot of hyper detail on there, oil painting, which is the beginning of oil painting, by the way, and all that richness of color and depth and all that good stuff is happening here. Then we look at the Aztec marriage couple over here with the Codex Mendoza in Mexico. So if we think about that marriage phrase, tie the knot, that is what we're seeing here. These two people are tying their clothing together. Their parents are on either side of them, I believe. Oh yeah, there's also a priest. So he's 20, the male is 20, the female is 14 or 15. So it takes place in the groom's home in front of the hearth. So this is their fireplace. So again, it's in the home. The marriage ceremony is happening there, and there's some food sources, and there's a astrological chart up here telling how they match. There's a lot of energy and time went into this match to make sure they're going to be compatible. Okay, so, oh yeah, and the red and the yellow earth adorned in red feathers. So they're on this mat. That's their little area, their marriage area. That's sort of their little sacred space.